Lessons. The writers, who have no musical knowledge, decide to make an episode centered entirely around music.
Picard tells Data he wants to talk to a Professor Mowray about some boring archaeological stuff, but there is a communications blackout for 3 hours while an experiment in stellar cartography is being run.
So Picard goes to his ready room to look at some stuff on his own, but the library and replicators are also off for the same reasons.
He wonders what the hell is up, because apparently being captain of a ship doesn't mean he would be informed about something like that.
And he goes down to stellar cartography, where a woman is directing everybody in the dark, and is irritated that Picard opened the door.
She tells Picard that he ruined whatever the experiment was, before noticing who he is, and identifies herself as Lieutenant Commander Darren.
She's new to the Enterprise, and requested it because of its requirements that your hairstyle is allowed to run wild.
She says they weren't expecting anyone to be up at 3 a.m., but I thought they ran on continuously rotating shifts, like you would expect when you're out in space.
They do. She's an idiot.
Picard complains about not having access to the replicators, which, yeah, does that mean nobody could eat during that time? I don't know if I could go 3 hours without eating. Darren brings the replicators back online and makes Picard a special tea blend that he has a weird reaction to.
Because it was gross. She says they figured out how to anticipate what star systems will look like 2 million years before they're formed or something.
And they needed to take precise gravimetric readings to predict that, which for some reason necessitated turning off all those systems.
What is she talking about? Does that even make any sense?
I mean, I guess. I mean, you're not going to know if your findings are accurate or not because it's 2 million years in the future or whatever.
What are the practical applications to even knowing that, though?
It seemed kind of pointless. So it makes sense that she's in Starfleet.
Couldn't she work on something more practical, like anything?
On the bridge, Riker tells Picard they are arriving at a nebula, which Darren is going to want to study.
And Data reminds Picard that there's going to be a concert later, and he should come to hear the fake music.
Picard has food with Beverly, and she mentions the weird tea, which she really likes. And Picard lies and says he found the pattern in the replicator files.
The best way to start any relationship is with lies.
He mentions meeting Darren and tells Beverly about the experiment they're running. And then they just abandon their meal to go to the concert.
So who cleans up?
That's what the Baryon sweep is for. It cleans up all the food that they just leave laying around.
It made me hungry just watching them eat, and I was pissed that they left all of it there. And it turns out performing with Data is Darren on the piano. And I was looking forward to her unrealistic playing. But Brent Spiner will not be topped. I would like to hear what it would actually sound like based on what they were doing.
Afterward, Picard compliments Darren on her skill. He points out something about diminished fifths or half octagons or something.
He picks out a specific arpeggio and reveals that he was actually able to aurally discern a specific chord she played.
During the second arpeggio of the first movement, I noticed that you played an F minor chord instead of a diminished D.
Pretty impressive and highly unrealistic considering A, what we've seen concerning Picard's musical prowess, and B, no. Just no.
He's impressed because she picked a different note to play, but did he know what the note was supposed to be?
That's what was implied, but I did not buy it. It was the writers saying, hey, is music a thing? All right.
It's good to know at least that their approach to music is the same as their approach to science.
It's assuming Picard was so familiar with that specific piece that he would be able to pick something like that out, which could happen in real life, but Picard is not the person to be able to do that.
Yeah. Is that all you had for that?
Yes.
Darren goes to the bridge to request that Riker let her use the main sensor array for a few more hours, but he says that engineering is already scheduled to use it, and she reluctantly agrees to come back tomorrow.
And her being upset made me think, where was she coming from that she was allowed to just make demands like that and they would be granted?
Yeah, and you would think she would know and would have agreed to whatever their schedule is already, especially if she's doing experiments that are shutting down the entire ship.
And she's not some random crew member. She's a department head, which means she has a bunch of people underneath her. She should be on top of shit.
Darren visits Picard in his quarters and catches him playing with his flute, which he tries to pretend wasn't planned.
When she asks what kind it is, he says it's a Resican flute. And she says she's never seen one before, which seemed a really odd thing to say. They go to countless planets who all must have multiple cultures and a plethora of instruments. It would be stupid to think that you would know all instruments from the galaxy.
Just looking at Earth, there's going to be things that you've never seen before. I did like the way he referenced the inner light without shoving it in my face. And he proceeds to show off his skills.
She says they should play together and pulls out the most ridiculous piano mat thing that I couldn't stop laughing at. Those mats actually exist, but they are toys.
And here they act like it's the greatest thing that was ever invented.
And the fact that she only had like 3 octaves on that thing, the way her hands were moving when she was playing, and the fact she somehow got pedal action, it was so dumb.
But it also had additional keys, reflecting the additional notes that will be discovered in the future.
I also would have liked to have heard what they were doing and what it actually would have sounded like.
She asks him to play his flute so she can accompany him on the keyboard.
And she is super condescending the way she praises him.
Yeah, she treats him like he's a child and she's a teacher.
A teacher who wasn't good. I mean, you can praise kids without treating them like they're idiots.
Good. Very good.
Apparently, the Brandenburg concertos are too much, so they get into variations on Frère Jacques.
Which was awesome.
So good.
And Picard appears delighted that somebody finally told him he doesn't suck on this flute. I think she. I'm not going to say that. That is inappropriate.
Afterward, Picard, in a very cheerful mood, asks Riker to practice fencing with him.
I thought it was really funny.
I'm not really very good. Doesn't matter, so long as you enjoy it.
In sickbay, Darren is really sticking it to Beverly, talking about Picard and all the time they're spending together. I kind of wanted Beverly to jab Darren with something.
And I like how Beverly's jealousy causes a magnetic pull on the camera toward her face.
The fact that Darren said she sprained something playing the piano, you're doing something wrong.
Darren leads Picard to a hidden, out-of-the-way Jeffries tube, which she says is the most acoustically perfect spot on the ship, which sounded incredibly made up.
And the fact that when Picard said, "How did you find this?" she said she just crawled around the ship. The ship's pretty freaking big.
She did say she didn't explore every single spot, so there's probably 1 or 2 that she left out. And at first I thought maybe she just wanted to get Picard alone in an out-of-the-way area, but it doesn't seem to be the case. She seems to actually think that it's the most acoustically perfect place on the ship.
Must be nice being a department head on the Enterprise, where you can just do whatever you want, demand resources, and crawl around the ship and play the piano. Picard starts playing the piece from The Inner Light, and Darren starts accompanying him, and it was supposed to be this big emotional moment, but I couldn't stop rolling my eyes.
And I like how she was exaggeratedly moved when he first played it, even though he only played about 10 seconds.
It is a nice folk tune, but I wasn't crying over it.
Geordi ends up hearing their duet and tries to track it down, but he can't tell where it's coming from. And for some reason, Data's advanced robot ears didn't pick it up.
And it made me wonder, do people ever listen to music while they're working on the ship? Help pass the time while they're doing their stuff?
No, because that would involve copyright issues.
Get some space music, get some Klingon opera. But the music has stopped because the 2 musicians, and that's in quotes, are sucking face.
Later, Darren talks to Picard in the turbo lift, but when someone else enters, Picard suddenly turns super professional, which puts her off.
He goes to talk to Troy privately about dating protocols on the ship. He says he's worried being in a relationship with someone under his command could affect his objectivity.
Given his flagrant disregard for the Prime Directive, I don't see how things could get any worse. And at one point he says that Starfleet has no regulations about a captain dating a fellow officer, which is kind of surprising.
And Troy tells him to go for it, because she's probably tired of sensing his raging erection every time she walks in the room.
Picard goes to visit Darren, who gives him his professional attitude right back, so he apologizes and confirms his interest.
Later, he tells her about his experiences in the Inner Light, and again, it was stupid how as soon as he mentioned the planet, Darren said, "I've never heard of that planet." Why would she have heard of that planet, even if it hadn't been wiped out 1,000 years ago? Is she really that full of herself that she thinks she should know all of those things?
Why do you think Picard is so attracted to her?
Good point. He says he's telling her the story to show what music means to him and what it means to be able to share it with someone, before pulling the Picard maneuver.
Later, Darren talks to Riker about an ensign she wants transferred to her department, and he gets mad because she didn't approve it with him before making the offer to the ensign.
And denies the request.
He goes to talk to Picard about how he feels uncomfortable saying no to Darren's requests because of her relationship with Picard. But Picard tells him to use his own best judgment and not worry about it, showing that he's not entirely a bad leader.
Later at dinner, Picard relays the conversation to Darren, which isn't super professional. But it's not really surprising. I mean, Troy will have a private counseling session with someone and then go talk to someone else about the private counseling session. They discuss the ramifications of their relationship before Picard is called away.
Worf says they've received a message from people on a planet requesting evacuation because of a firestorm approaching.
The evacuation will take several hours, and they don't have several hours, and Darren suggests creating a firewall to deflect some of the storm's heat.
Riker gives them all their orders, including sending Darren down to be in charge of setting up the shield. And when everyone else walks out, Picard talks to Darren about how someone else could do it, but she says Riker must have picked her because she was the best person for the job.
I really liked Riker throwing out everybody's assignments. We don't see it in detail as much. I thought it was pretty cool.
Everything will need to be coordinated from the surface. Mr. Data, you will coordinate the evacuation of the colonists. Marquez, you'll take some people down and track the storm. Doctor, there are 9 patients in the outpost infirmary. Your first priority will be to get them to sickbay. Commander, you'll be in charge of deploying the deflectors. Let's go.
And when they beam down, Picard is visibly nervous.
Darren is activating the deflectors on the planet, and she says there's a problem, and they'll have to activate everything manually, which means they'll need to stay down there while the storm is fast approaching.
Picard orders them to hold position while they finish the evacuation, and as the storm gets closer, everyone gets more and more nervous.
The colonists manage to evacuate, and Riker is the last one back with some of the teams, but 2 were left behind, including Darren's.
Picard goes to his quarters and mopes.
And Worf contacts him and says they found some survivors, so he runs to the transporter room.
At first it seems like Darren is not among them, but then suddenly Darren beams in with another survivor, and Picard just stands there. Picard gives us a captain's log saying that 8 crew members were lost.
Later, Darren tells Picard how some of them managed to survive, but they had to watch the others burn to death.
Which unfortunately we didn't get to see.
I imagined it looked kind of like Loud as a Whisper.
Picard asks if she blamed him for her predicament, but she tells Picard she was more afraid that he would blame himself if she died.
Picard says when he believed she was dead, he just shut down, and could only focus on how his music would never again bring him joy.
And when he saw her beam in, he decided he would never put her in danger again.
Plus, her contract was only for 1 episode.
They jokingly say they could resign, but no, they won't do it. Darren says she'll apply for a transfer, and Picard says they could always see each other again, but for some reason they don't believe that would actually happen.
There have to be tons of Starfleet relationships like that, though.
Darren tells Picard not to give up his music, and leaves in tears.
Lessons. Overall?
This episode reminded me of Family, in that it was a character-focused follow-up to a big event in Picard's life. It was cool to get some more material dealing with the events of the Inner Light, and just like with Family, I was glad there wasn't a big threat to the ship or to Picard, even though we did get those firestorms. And even the firestorms actually affected the characters in a way other than just by being a threat. I liked seeing Picard's discomfort with not knowing how to handle his relationship with Darren. I thought some of the buildup of the relationship was very hokey, and I thought Darren could have used more personality, but once things got going, I thought their relationship was alright. The ending didn't make any sense to me. I get why Picard felt the way he did, but he said they could still see each other, but for some reason they treated it like that just wouldn't happen. That was very disappointing. Other than that, this episode could have used a bit more in terms of plot. It felt like not much happened in this episode. The subplot about Riker's issues of not knowing how to deal with Darren once she was in a relationship with Picard didn't go anywhere, and that time could have been better used to give us some more personal discussions between Picard and Darren. Too much of the early stuff was just about music, and that stuff was ridiculous. But I still thought it was alright. I didn't think it was a bad relationship, and I liked the overall idea behind it. I gave it a B-.
I gave it a C+. I also agree that the relationship later on was pretty good, but the early stuff was so painful. I think hokey is a good word to describe it. Have we had any follow-up on Vash since she left with Q?
No, but she did appear in an episode of Deep Space Nine.
The thing that stood out to me the most in this episode was the music-heavy content in the first half, where the writers were using it as a plot device, but they didn't actually understand the content, which made it ring very false.
So just like all the science-based episodes.
Well, music is science. It's actually sound frequencies and baryon particles. Just gotta be careful, though, because you don't want two songs to slam into each other and form a black hole. I also wish Riker's dilemma had been solved in a way other than her just leaving. And yes, why could they not have a relationship where they're not in the same room every day? This one could have been a lot better. I like the references back to the inner light. I like how Picard showed how much it actually affected him. So the arpeggio of the season continues. Hopefully it won't diminish. Thanks for watching.